All right, good evening. Welcome to the Linda Hall Library. I'm Eric Ward, Vice President for Programs and Education. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I want to give a special welcome to library trustees and President Circle members who are in attendance tonight. We can't do these programs without your support, so thank you for being here tonight and for your support. Also, welcome to our live stream viewers from across the world. Bruce, I want to give a special shout out to you. I hope you're watching online. And before we begin, I just want to point out a couple of events going on. We have two exhibitions on view. Life Beyond Earth in our West Gallery will be on view until October 11th, so time is running out if you haven't seen that yet. And you even have less time to see Follow the Recipe, our cookbook exhibition in our East Gallery. That will close August 29th, and will be open a little while after the program tonight if you want to stick around and look at those exhibitions, or of course feel free to come back. Also, and this kind of ties into our title of the talk tonight, ladies will be present. Next month on September 18th will be our annual Bartlett Lecture. Observational seismologist Maureen Long, who's chair of the Earth and Planetary Sciences Department at Yale University, will discuss discoveries about the structure and evolution of the central and eastern U.S., including the New Madrid seismic zone, and what they might tell us about why earthquakes happen far away from tectonic plate boundaries. And then on Tuesday, October 7th, most of our programs are on a Thursday. This is on a Tuesday, October 7th, Nobel laureate Carol Greider will explore how her research in telomeres is transforming our understanding of age-related degenerative diseases. Dr. Greider is professor of molecular, cell, and developmental biology at UC Santa Cruz and the recipient of the 2009 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. And now it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's distinguished speaker, Dr. Allison Marsh, and to welcome her back to the library. And I say welcome back because Professor Marsh was the library's 2024-2025 NEH Fellow. She was in residence here at the Linda Hall for 9 months, completing her fellowship just this past June. Dr. Marsh combines her interest in engineering, history, and museums to tell stories of technology through historical artifacts. Her main research interests revolve around how the general public comes to understand complex engineering ideas, especially outside the classroom, through museums, documentaries, TV shows, and so on. She writes the monthly Pass Forward column for IEEE Spectrum, and she was the consultant for the Crash Course History of Science series. She is an associate professor at the University of South Carolina, where she is also the co-director of the Ann Johnson Institute for Science, Technology, and Society. And please welcome Professor Allison Marsh to the stage.
Well, thank you, Eric, for those kind words of introductions, and greetings to everyone who's here in person, who's joining us virtually online, and even greetings to everyone who is going to be watching the delayed recording that will be posted at a later date. I am very excited to be back in Kansas City and at the Linda Hall Library, and I'm excited to share my research with you. So yes, for 9 months, I had the pleasure of spending almost every weekday from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. in the library's main reading room right here at a desk right there by the window, where I went page by page through the main journals of the AIEE, the IRE, which is the American Institute of Electrical Engineers, and the Institute of Radio Engineers. Those are the two predecessor organizations for today's IEEE, or the Institute of Electronic and Electrical Engineers. So the IEEE is the world's largest technical professional organization. It's dedicated to advancing technology for the benefit of humanity, which I think is just a wonderful mission. We should all be trying to benefit humanity. It has more than 420,000 members globally. Personally, I have been a member since I was an undergraduate student. I did study engineering when I was in college. And I also want to make sure that I give this disclaimer because there might be a little bit of negativity here, but I want to say that I love the IEEE and I appreciate all of the work that they do. They have supported my work since I was an undergraduate in many different ways. I volunteer for them regularly. As I was mentioned in the introductions, I currently write the Pass Forward column for their monthly magazine. But you might say that they still have a problem with women. Even as other engineering disciplines approach gender parity, and some even flip to being more women than men, which is the case in biomedical and environmental engineering, electrical engineering has stubbornly stayed at 12 to 15% women for decades. Absolutely for decades. It was like that when I was an undergrad, it's like that today. According to a survey in 2023 by the American Society of Engineering Education, electrical engineering has the lowest percentage of women getting degrees. It's even lower than petroleum engineering, which is 16%, or mining engineering, which is at 18%. And there is a little bit of fudging in those numbers, so we can talk about that in the Q&A if you want to. But to get, even in some subspecialties, such as microwave engineering, the percentage of women is close to 3 to 4%. So there is a lot of work to do to raise those numbers up. Why? I don't really have the magic answer, but I've talked to my fellow members of IEEE, and these are all actual reasons that people have given me. So, first off, there's never been any women here, so there's no history. You don't need to talk about that. They really don't like the math, so can't do that. Or they're just not good at problem solving. Well, I don't buy it. I don't believe it. And I also want to change that attitude. And I also wanted to say, to be clear, not everyone feels that way. There have been many, many men who have mentored me who encourage women in this path, but I still think we can do more. And that's where my work at the Linda Hall Library has come in. So my fellowship proposal was very, very simple. I wanted to do basic, foundational, archival research. I just wanted to go through the pages of the journals one by one and write down any mention of a woman, regardless of context, and uncover as many names as I could, especially from the early decades, starting in the 1880s, and I sort of made it up to about the 1960s in some of those journals, because with all due respect to our wonderful women here, Ms. Ada Lovelace, Grace Hopper, and Katherine Johnson, there are more women who have been working in this field than these three. These are three who get trotted out. They also aren't engineers. They all happen to be mathematicians, even though computer science and electrical engineering do like to claim them. They like to say that they were mathematicians. And so I wanted to go find more women that we could celebrate. And the Linda Hall Library was the perfect place to do this research, because if you don't already know it, it is the home to the Engineering Society's library. So this is the original building of the Engineering Society's library, the Engineering Societies. It started in 1906 by an initial donation by Andrew Carnegie. It's located in Midtown Manhattan. And here are the founding 4 engineering societies representing the main disciplines. We have mechanical engineering, mining engineering, electrical engineering, and civil engineering. Chemical engineers were added a little bit later, so they now talk about the 5 founding societies. And other sister societies also used this building. Each society had their own floors in the building, and there was a common area for meetings, classrooms, and a huge auditorium. Each originally came with their own library, but eventually these were combined into the single Engineering Society's library, which was located on the 12th and the 13th floors of the building. This is the main reading room in 1928. And many decades later, when the societies decided that they should sell their building, went to Trump if you wanted to know, that's where it is. It's been torn down. So their fabulous library was packed up and moved to its new home here in Kansas City. At the time of the transfer, which was in 1995, they estimated the size of the collection was approximately 360,000 volumes. These occupied 5 floors of stacks and approximately 25,000 square feet in their old building. And that catalog is now back behind the doors here. So I got to see their catalog. I got to see some of their original records, and it's a lot of fun. Although we don't really use their catalog right now, everything's digital, so that's great. So for the 9 months, I went through all of the electrical engineering journals, and I hate to give you this spoiler, but turns out there were women there. I don't know if you thought that. So I want to show you a quick video. It's about 1 minute long that sort of showcases my research as it is now. So you'll watch that there's a tiny green dot in the middle that's about to sort of explode. The green dot in the middle is my master list of names of women that I have come across. Each spoke that comes out of that middle green dot is an individual woman. All of the other dots that sort of start floating around, those are other mentions that I'm starting to link to make their relationships. So you'll start emerging nodes that show their schools, the places they worked, their honor societies, things like that, where you can start seeing, okay, who are these women? Where are they located? Who do they associate with? You start seeing all of these different connections that are a lot of just fun to dig into and see what's going on. So I have to emphasize that, this is very much the beginning. I have so much more work to do. I spent most of my fellowship simply collecting the data, so I was trying to just get as much data in my time that I was here. I haven't really had the time to sit down and analyze it. That is my project going forward. I'm going to keep adding to my database. I want to make it publicly available through a website. Plus, I will be publishing more articles and hopefully a book based on this research. And just a quick note about the title of my talk, which was Ladies Will Be Present. It's a phrase that I came across early on in my research. So back in the 1880s, this phrase just kept coming up. It was like a reminder to the male members that women were going to be at whatever upcoming meeting that they were advertising, and they should really be on their best behavior, right? The AIEE has a lot of quirks to it, and one of the quirks that they had is that they really liked to take counts of everyone who was there. So they counted the number of members, the number of students, the number of guests, and the number of women who happened to be there. And so at these meetings, and the numbers that I've been able to crunch, it's been about 20% women at each of these meetings. I don't know who these women are. I don't have those details yet. They were most likely wives or daughters. They may have been interested in the subject. They may not have been interested in the subject. But if they were paying attention to who they were meeting and the talks that they were attending, they were seeing some of the major names in the development of the field of electrical engineering. If you think back to the 1880s, 1890s, the turn of the 20th century, electricity had not yet been figured out. They didn't actually have units of measurement that they all agreed on. These are the foundational people who are just trying to make up like what's happening here from their experiments. And these women were witness to it right then. So I'm going to be the first to say that all of the dots on my chart are not engineers. And partly that's because it is sometimes difficult to know who actually is an engineer. And I want you to hold on to that thought for a minute because we're going to come back to it. Because this is Edith Clark, who is recognized as the first woman electrical engineer in the United States. She was the first one to be professionally employed as an electrical engineer. She's the first woman to have a master's degree in engineering. She's the first woman to present a paper at the AIE annual conference. She was the first one recognized by Tau Beta Pi, which is the honor society for for engineers. And she was the first woman to be named as a fellow of the AIE. Clearly, she's a pioneer. She is wonderful. Okay, go forward 11 years. This is the 50th anniversary of the AIE. They have a big celebration, and they print in their journal the 10 members who are women. So if you're keeping track, that's about adding 1 woman per year, which is really not a great progress in my mind. It's also a little bit interesting, and we're going to come back to this in a minute, how they're listed. So we start with Miss Edith Clark. We have all the misses. Check out Miss Mabel McFerrin, because she's one of my favorites. But then we have Mrs. Paul, Mrs. Rowland. So we get into some problems that you can see. I'm foreshadowing. There's going to be some trouble ahead. But clearly, there's also a lot more women in my data. And they start well before Edith Clark in 1923. So who are they? And are they engineers? And I find that to be a really interesting question, because it asks at the heart, what does it mean to be an engineer? Is it your education? Is it your employment? Does your job title matter? Is it your publication records, your research? Is it the acknowledgement of others, the recognition that you're doing the work? Is it the membership in a professional society? The answer is not always clear. It was not clear then. It is not clear even today. Take education, which seems so simple. In the 1880s, there were no college degrees in electrical engineering. It was a developing field, and many people were learning at home through experimentation, or they were actually on the job trying to generate electricity and not dying and things like that. There were people who were trained as civil and mechanical engineers who then worked as electrical engineers, as did math majors and physics majors. And that is something that is still true today. You can major in math, you can major in physics, and then you can go get a job with the title of electrical engineer. So when you start asking who is an electrical engineer, suddenly it becomes a little bit hazy. And maybe it's like how you're employed, right? So General Electric is a good example. They hired a number of women. So did the National Bureau of Standards, what is today NIST. They employed women in fairly high numbers. I mean, I'm not saying it was drastic, but more than one. And women often did not get the title of engineer. That's actually why Edith Clark left GE for a couple of years. She went and taught in Istanbul for a while and said, no, I want the respect. And when she came back to the United States, came back to GE, she was given the title of engineer. But what about women who work in associated fields? I love this slide because it's a picture of the staff of the Institute of Radio Engineers. And you might notice they are all women, save for this one gentleman in the center. I have another photo of a similar group about a few years earlier. It was also all women with only one man. That one happens to be the mail boy. So a lot of these women, they ran the organization. They kept track of the membership, they had finances, they organized conferences, and oversaw the publication of many different journals. Some of the women were clearly doing secretarial work, but I wouldn't ever want to say that someone was just a secretary. But the women who edited the journals, they had college degrees in math, in a scientific field. They had to understand the content of the research that they were reading in order to copy edit it with any accuracy. They may not have been working as an engineer, but they could tell you if your theorems were correct. and they did not hesitate to point out errors or make corrections. I know that because people talk about, in their letters, they're complaining, oh, so-and-so is really strict. And I was like, yeah, it's because she knows something, right? So another way we could sort of think about how to categorize the engineers is maybe looking at published papers. But I know I've undercounted the women here. From the very beginning, the AIEE used a convention for publishing where you use your first two initials and then your last name. I love it. It's very gender neutral. If they had been doing peer review at the time, that would be great. It would be very blind. They didn't do peer review at the time. That's a new thing. And strangely, the very few people who did publish under their full names, many of them had gender neutral names. So you don't really know how many Ashleys, Merediths, Gales, and Lynn's I went to track down only to be disappointed that they were, in fact, men. But at some point, they started publishing photos, and that just helped me out a great deal, because suddenly I was like, oh, here are all the women. But it also creates more investigation work and leaves me asking different questions. So take Miss O.M. Kraumhout here. I gave a similar presentation to a smaller group back here in the spring. And when I gave this, and I was like, oh, I don't know who O.M. Kraumhout is, Eric Dorfman, the president of the library here, got very excited, and he went back to his office, and he started using generative AI. He was having a conversation, and he tracked down her first name. First name happens to be Aura. Knowing the name Aura got me to her obituary, where I found out her middle name, so now I know who O.M. is. And the obituary gave me more information, such that happens post this bio. So she gets a PhD from the University of Illinois. She then joins her husband at Florida State. She is designing a lot of instructional information there. She has a bunch of copyrighted things that you can still find. She also happened to found the local chapter of their IEEE. So emboldened, I was like, oh, maybe AI is my friend. It can help me track down other people, right? So I tried to work out with R.M. Marine, right? So Miss R.M. Marine here, the very first line, if you can't read it in the back, says that she was born in Norwood, Massachusetts on August 12th, 1924. Well, it might not be advisory to to publish your birth date in a journal today. That was very common. And so you can do a little bit of sort of research. And so I was like, hey, AI, what can we do with this woman? Well, hate to disappoint you, but AI comes back and says, searching for R.M. Marine born August 12, 1924 does not provide an exact match. But there are people with the last name of Reen and some with the first name of Raymond or Robert. And if you might be sensing a little bit of bias in our AI, they were not, I did not say, are we looking for an engineer? I just gave an initial and a birth date. Ended up with two men? I don't know. I feel like we could do a little bit of work here. So, or we have my friend here, J.E. Rosenthal. The last line of her bio says that her married name is Bramley. Well, I happen to know that she went by Jenny because I had her bio from a different journal. And in that bio, she goes a little bit more about this whole Bramley thing. She says that although all of her publications appear under her maiden name, during the war, she worked with the Civil Service, and the regulations required her to be known by her married name of Bramley. So goodbye, J.E. Rosenthal. Hello, Jenny Bramley. So you can understand how people and their legacies get a little bit lost. That was the government making us do that. Or here's my friend B.O. Buckley, Mrs. B.O. Buckland, who clearly published. Unfortunately, so did her husband, B.O. Buckland. They happen to be one of those married couples of electrical engineers. Today, most of the IEEE papers and the predecessor organizations have been digitized. They are available online if you are a member or through a research library, and they have it organized and cut many different ways, and you can go and look and find all of the papers written by any author. And if you try to look up B.O. Buckland, well, you get that there are 4 publications. Turns out 2 of them are by Mrs. B.O. Buckland, and 2 of them are by her husband. But because the database that they're using didn't have a way to sort by your title, by noting whether there are 2 people with the same name here, you end up with this mess. Another place to look to find our missing women from history are the acknowledgments. And I'm not the first person to look at this, but starting looking to see who thanks you for the work. Now, acknowledgments are not something that happens early on in the journals. It is something that comes later in the decade, so sort of 1930s, moving on from there. It never really becomes very common, but they're enough. And so we have phrases like this. The assistance of Miss H.C. Hertha is gratefully acknowledged. Or to Miss J.E. Dickey, we are indebted for aid in the design of the mixers. Acknowledgement is made of the valuable data and facts contributed by Clara Grace Moon and Alice G. Robertson. And I also want to thank Miss M. Packer, who made the numerical calculations, and for Miss M. Rudder for carrying out the many tests upon which this paper is based. So I want to just ask you, if the women are designing the experiments, running the experiments, collecting the data, crunching the numbers, and then they do a lot of the design and layout of the graphs, as well as type up the papers, at what point should their name, in fact, be more than just an acknowledgement? But the group of women who I really feel the most for are those who are in sort of nameless photos. So we know that these women were in the labs because their pictures are part of the research papers. So we know that they were there, they're doing the work, but the captions don't ever mention who they are. I don't really want to fault the labs there. This is common, whether it is a male pictured or a female pictured. They generally don't use names at all. They really want to actually describe what's going on in the picture, but it still would be helpful. Potentially, this is a place where we can start using AI to see if we have lots of image searches, and maybe we can find out who these women are. It's still a work in progress. So, what do we do next? Well, I have a lot of work to do just with my database, right? I want to get this all up and running and share as much with everyone of all of the fabulous women that I have learned about. So one way is through the Linda Hall Library's Scientists of the Day. So I've spoken to Bill and I was like, hey, you know what? There's a bit of a gender imbalance. Maybe I should write some of your Scientists of the Day and we can get more women focused here. One of the things that while I was a fellow in residence here, the staff really encouraged me to share what I was doing. So I'm now on social media and you can follow me if you want to see goofy ads featuring women from the 1950s, please go ahead and do so. And the last one is the Wikipedia Women in Red project. This is something that is relatively new to me. I've always been a user of Wikipedia. If I don't know a fact, it's my sort of go-to place. I say, oh, what date something happened? There it is, I'll find it. But I had never really contributed to Wikipedia until this past spring. I took an online course which sort of walked you through the steps of creating an article. It was designed for public historians, people who want to share their research with the public in a very meaningful way that's easily understood by as many people as possible. They were really promoting it in advance of the semi-quincentennial, which is our fancy word for the 250th celebration of the United States that's coming up next year. So they wanted to get as many sort of history out there. I use this as an opportunity to get more women engineers. So meet Mabel McFerrin Rockwell. So she was one of those first 10. At that point, she was still Miss Mabel McFerrin. But she did get married, and that is her first real mention in the journal. They thought it was so exciting that 2 of their member engineers got married that they should publish about it. And in fact, there were multiple couples. So of the sort of original 10, suddenly there were 6, couples. It's kind of, a little bit, they all knew each other. I don't think that's the most interesting thing about Mabel McFerrin. So she also happened to be the only woman who worked on Boulder Dam's electrical system, designing pretty much all of it, right? She also led the research team that improved spot welding for aircraft at Lockheed Aircraft. She went on and designed the electrical control system for the Polaris missile launchers. President Eisenhower named her the best woman engineer of the year. And then after all of that, in the last 2 decades of her life, she actually became an advocate for peace. She was like, we have learned enough about the science of weaponry. We should really now see how we can work to ensure that no one else has these problems. And yet, 6 months ago, when I was trying to find more information about her, and I did what everybody does, and I type her into Google, there was no Wikipedia page about her. So that was my call. I needed to set her up, get her a page. This is actually her old page. Now that I've published it, people are updating it and adding more information. And on July 6th of this past year, I nominated her to be on the front page of Wikipedia in the Did You Know section of the front page. And on that day, almost 5,000 people learned about who Mabel McFerrin was. I always call her Mabel McFerrin because she does divorce her husband early on. And the story is that he was not getting promoted as fast as she was, and he was really not happy about that. I have seen that in sort of informal records. I have not seen that in the formal records, so it's not part of her Wikipedia entry, but I do love that story, and I would wish that I could really say, yes, that is right. So, needless to say, there are a lot more women out there than, Ada Lovelace, Grace Hopper, and Katherine Johnson. But there's also a lot more work that we need to do to make this happen. And so I wanted to sort of close by sort of reflecting a little bit on what the work that I've done, how it's been received so far, and what are the next steps. And I say this because, as was mentioned, I was here as part of a fellowship sponsored by the National Endowment of the Humanities. And this past spring, I also was one of those fellows who lost their funding with a nice letter in April saying, this funding has been rescinded. I personally did not lose my funding because the Linda Hall Library stepped up and decided that my research was enough to be funded through the end of my fellowship. So, yes, thank you. That is exactly the right answer. So regardless of your political persuasion, we need to make sure that funding like this remains, active. So whether you, support your government and go out and vote, or whether you make private donations to fabulous facilities like here, you can choose your own path, but it is a great way to support research that is accurate as well as new, exciting, and telling you a history that hasn't been told before. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. I talked a little bit faster than I had practiced, but that just means that we have more time for questions, and I have so much more to say, so I do really welcome any questions from the folks here, as well as anyone online. So. Oh, and we already have questions, yay! So.
And we are live streaming, so I'll come by with a microphone. Raise your hand. Somebody had their hand?
Right here.
Right, okay.
Thank you for your talk. So how have your colleagues received your research? Because I know there's a kind of controversy about this topic in engineering.
So I have a follow-up question. So which colleagues do you mean? Because I have many different types of colleagues.
I'm talking about the broader kind of scholarly community within engineering.
I mean, the broader scholarly community is incredibly supportive of this type of research. So they love it. They want to dig more into it. They have no problem with discovering that women existed in the past and they did incredible work. So that there is no problem there. So I can say that without any difficulty. There are other areas of challenge, and some of them have nothing to do with sort of the research that is specific here. But historians of technology, like myself, are not as prominent as general historians or historians of social and cultural history. And so there are a lot of historians who have gone into the profession simply because they do not like math and they do not like science. And so they want to work in the humanities. And then they don't really understand all of the necessary content that comes up behind all of the work. So I have colleagues who work on the history of television or the history of radio, and they're talking about the shows that are produced or the actors who are on that, and they never think, wait a minute, how did that actually work? How did we get to the technology that we can produce and air, that we can air live, we can air recorded, how we want to do that. So historians of technology always have that trouble within the broader field of history. Public historians, people who are much more interested in sharing their research with the broader public, not just publishing in academic journals, also have a tendency to be a little bit belittled by mainstream academic historians. So that's another place where, I'm very excited that I wrote this on this Wikipedia article. I'm very excited that anyone who Googles Mabel McFerrin, now it is the first Google response that comes up. No one in the history department would really care at all that I did that. That is not something that would, affect my promotion in any manner. And then we also have to look at the engineers, right? So the engineering community, for the most part, I'm going to say my interactions have been very positive, very welcoming, more curiosity and a little bit of skepticism. There's the comments that I showed at the beginning of the slide of the talk. Those are real comments that I have. I've been exposed to. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes I am the only woman in the room. And so I would really like to make it that I'm not the only woman in the room. So I'm always encouraging people of all types to study engineering, technology. I don't care if they go on to become a practicing engineer. I just want them to understand how technology works around them and how to make themselves a much more informed citizen. So I don't answer your question, a long-winded answer. So
We have a couple online questions.
hello, online people.
Yes. If you're type them in the Q&A chat box if you're on Zoom, or in the chat if you're on YouTube. An online viewer asked, have you suggested that IEEE include women authors' real names instead of initials so that women are apparent in historical records?
Oh, that is a great question, and I have never said that directly, made that recommendation to the I should back up. The IEEE is a huge, sprawling, global organization. So if you don't know the IEEE, it is really, really a big thing. They have special groups based on your geographic area, where you live, and how you can meet up with your fellow engineers. They also have special interest groups based on your technological background, so what you specialize in. Sometimes, the person who is your best colleague from specialization might live in Europe or Asia, and you have, they have conferences and journals, and they're probably most famous for their standards. So if you think about any electrical standard, it often has run through the IEEE in some different way. So sort of getting and grasping their publications, that's a huge challenge. And so, no, I have not said, hey, everybody publish with their first names. But I would like to encourage it. And it's an interesting question because it does cut both ways, right? If you know the author is a woman, do you meet it with the same level of professionalism, support? Do you have any preconceived ideas about the author of the paper if you know the gender of the paper? These are questions that we don't really know the answer to or how it would move forward. It would be nice, and I will put this out, and I have made this suggestion to the folks who run the database that has all of these papers digitized. I would love if you could sort by gender and just come up with all of the women. That does not exist yet, and I would really love for that to happen.
Right, anybody with a question? All right, sir.
Allison, thank you for your talk and for your research. Just wondered, in your research, did you unearth any schools historically that you felt were on the leading edge of integrating women into the field? And then also today, are you aware of schools who are doing some interesting work to drive gender equity within EE?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it actually comes back to that question of who is an engineer and how does the education get you there. So the schools that hands down come up earliest with women are women's colleges. So Vassar and Bryn Mawr are the schools that 100% have women who are majoring in math and physics, and they're supporting this new field of electrical engineering, the exploration into that. So those are two schools that far and away lead more. Once you start getting into that, the women have broken through the barriers, you do see women at the same leading schools for engineering that you would see today. So MIT, Stanford, the women who sort of make it are making it at these top schools here. Similarly, you start looking at where are they employed, and like I said, the National Bureau of Standards, or what we would call NIST today, they are early employers of women engineers, as was GE. Local utilities didn't have that much of a problem, so Mabel McFerrin really gets started in the California utility industry, so that's one way where she made her mark. As to schools that have really shown quite a lot of support for women, it's a complicated answer. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's not that complicated, because the schools that have really shown support for their female faculty are the schools that have the most retention of the women students. What is very clear in all of the data is that we have a large number of women who start out as a freshman saying, I want to be an engineer, and then each year you see fewer and fewer of them, so that you just lose them. I have been doing an oral history project with women in the field of microwave engineering, and Rhonda Franklin, who is an amazing pioneer, groundbreaking woman in the field, who's at Minnesota. She thinks the problem actually starts much earlier, and that you have to push the mathematical education, back in middle school, in high school, because one of the reasons why there are more women who are going into other fields of engineering as opposed to electrical is because the math is hard. You do have to have the math. And if you are starting college without having an understanding of calculus, you're already behind, which means you would have to convert this into a 5 or 6 year undergraduate program. And suddenly with the costs of school, that's become a bigger problem. So there's problems upon problems that keep making it difficult. Schools like Purdue, when they had a woman dean, they saw their number of women engineers go up. Not hard, retain your female faculty. So make it a great environment for them to work. Oh, we have like 3 questions now.
Okay, yeah, I'll come to you.
I actually have a couple. So
I love
firstly,
that.
how did you generate your animated graph of the nodes and the spokes? And then the second one is, would you recommend someone who is a physics undergrad hoping to go into nuclear engineering to join the IEEE?
Yes to that answer. That one's easy. Yes, no, and I say that just because I have been an IEEE member since I was a student, and I have found them to be a great organization. They have also funded me in so many different ways. So when I got my first grant from the IEEE when I was, a sophomore or junior in college, and then when I was in grad school, they funded me on a trip to England to present a paper at Bletchley Park, and they're a good organization, and they really want to support their students and their recent grads, emerging professionals. So, yes to that. And having just said all of that, I forgot your first part of the question. My graph, right? So yes, and I have to thank the other research fellows who are here with me at the Linda Hall while I was doing my research, because this is sort of the first new big project I've taken on in many, many years. And when I say that, I say the last time I made a really big research project, I would go to the archives and I would photocopy stuff, and then I would have piles of paper and sort things out like that. And I was like, okay, so I don't think an Excel spreadsheet is really going to cut it on this one. So what do I use? And a number of different fellows recommended the program Obsidian to me, and that's the one that I've chosen to use. It is an open source markup language, very easy to sort of learn and get going. Still learning. There's a lot more for me to learn, but it's very easy to sort of get started. And the graph feature is built right in, and it's really, it's just fun to watch, right? So I think it's fun to watch. And some of people here saw, I had posted a 30-second clip of the research as it was in January, and it was super fun, but it was exactly half of what I had now. And so I just can't wait to just sort of keep seeing it grow. And the visualization is something that makes it very easy to see what are the nodes of connection. So, to answer the previous question of what are the schools that were doing great work, I know Vassar and Bryn Mawr because I kept coming across the names over and over again. But I don't know what other linkages are there that are in the data, but I have not held in my head to connect yet. And the program here makes that easily available for me. So that graph is entirely interactive. So if I want to click on any one of the dots, it'll bring me back to that main page. It's also a great program because it allows you to upload PDFs directly and photos directly to it so that you can keep track of your notes that way too. So, okay.
All right. Somebody had a hand up. There you go.
Yeah. Both of you.
Dr. Marsh, what is the genesis of your enthusiasm and inspiration to do this? Was there a family member? Was there an educator or someone that propelled you to say that I want to celebrate what women have accomplished?
So yes, there is, and probably not going to be a very diplomatic answer here. So yes, a book came out for the 140th anniversary of the IEEE. And when I received my copy in the mail, well, first off, I was like, who celebrates the 140th anniversary? But they celebrated the 140th anniversary, and it focuses on sort of milestones in the history. I think it's like 37 landmark things, and they're all really important parts of history. Yeah, I get behind that. It was a very image-heavy book. It was very beautifully laid out. And when I got it, I just sort of flipped through looking at the images. And after a while, I was like, wait a minute, there's something going on here. And then I went back to the beginning, and I counted how many pictures of women were in there. And there were 5. It was a huge book, all of these pictures, 5 women. And I said, you know what? For the 150th anniversary of the IEEE, I'm going to write a book that's 150 years of women in electrical engineering. And I feel like, so I have about 8 years, and I'm like, yes, that's enough time for me to actually conduct the research and write this book. So you guys all have to hold me accountable. I'm going to write this book, and at the 150th anniversary of the IEEE, everybody has to buy my book and look at all the fabulous women we found. So, okay. So there's 2 questions right here. We have 2 hands.
Hi. So you talked a little bit about the retention rate for women in colleges as you progress through your degree.
Yes.
So wondering if you've done any research into the retention rate of women after they've entered the industry, and how many end up staying as opposed
Not
to...
enough.
Yeah.
So I don't have that answer. Do you have that answer behind you? Okay, we have someone. I love this. I'm outsourcing my answers.
According to the Society of Women Engineers, roughly.
Go, sweetie.
Yeah, go, sweetie. Which, by the way, is why I don't have more people here with me tonight, but they've got a conflicting event. I'm so sorry.
No.
About 25% of women engineers leave the workforce and never return. Okay, and there's a number of different reasons that they state, but some does actually come down to the environment that they're working in, and that it is a tough environment to work in, especially if you are the only person that is in the room that looks like you.
I want to sort of add to that because I was, I have a degree in engineering. I worked in the technical consulting field for a number of years, and then I decided that that wasn't for me. And I decided to chuck it all and go become a historian, which is, I have to say my parents were a little bit skeptical about that career path, but I think it's worked out. And so for a long time, I actually had this sort of fighting within myself, like, can I call myself an engineer now that I'm not a practicing engineer? And that's why I've come down to this. I really do want everybody to study engineering at school, even if they don't become engineers, because I decided that yes, I can still count myself as an engineer because of the mindset that I learned while training for an engineer. It's definitely a way to think through problem solving, a way to approach a situation, come up with multiple potential answers, and then start weighing which ones are better. And sometimes you weigh what's best by cost. Sometimes it's based by social impact. Sometimes it's based by environmental impact. But you start thinking about all of the different ways to solve a problem. And once you say, oh, wait a minute, there's no one right answer. There are many different answers that each have their pros and cons. That's when I think we can, as a society, have a much more complicated question about, what does technological progress look like? And so when I'm teaching to my students, I always ask them, I'm like, hey, do you know how many engineers are in Congress right now? And they're like, no, I don't think. Well, there's like 1 senator who's an engineer. I think there's 7 representatives who are engineers. These are the people who are making all of the sort of decisions on infrastructure, on broadband, on our satellites. I would like them to have more of a technical background. So even if they're not practicing as engineers, I would like to have them thought through all of that problem solving. So, yeah.
You actually ended up answering
Oh,
the question.
sorry.
When I have another one. So,
Oh, good.
But yeah, my question was it was piggybacking on her because in my own experience of other women, reading statistics, I know that a number of women don't stay in STEM fields once they go into them for various reasons. So yeah, I had curiosity about your path, but you answered all that. So wonderful.
But, people always ask that question about engineers and about women engineers. Like, do they ask that question about history majors? How many history majors actually go on to be a practicing historian, like a paid professional historian? Yes, some actually do, but for the most part, people who study history go into law or politics or any number of things that involves reading, researching, being able to write coherently. These are all, as a history professor, we always talk about all of the skills that you can learn to use your history major going forward. What if we talked about engineering in the same way? That the end goal is not necessarily to work as an engineer, but to use everything that you've learned about how to think and apply that to whatever your next career is. I was going to say right here.
All right.
So as a history major who is a practicing
Yes.
historian, I'm really curious. You spent all day, every day going through these journals, and you clearly uncovered more than women in engineering. And I'm dying to know what other stories you came across that maybe weren't a part of your grant project, but you had to have made notes about them, and you've got stories.
Oh, 100%. I have so many files saved on my computer of so many projects that I could distract myself writing up over and over again. So yes, there are tons of other things. Thank you so much for the question. There were some stories that were absolutely just so good when I came across them that I had to publish them right then and get that information out. So an example for that is when I came across this really fascinating idea that they're like, let's have a coast-to-coast meeting where everybody is tuned in at the same time. And I was like, is this the first virtual meeting? It was 1916. And the AIEE decided that they were going to have, only a few years after the first transcontinental electrical cables, telephone cables, and they were like, yeah, let's do this. And so they got 6 cities to host, and the program is amazing. They all, you had a formal invitation, you sat in an auditorium. Every seat got their own earpiece, and then on the stage, there was someone who led the program. They were the only people who got the mics, everybody else was muted. And they introduced everybody from each of the 6 cities. Then, it was very performative. Everybody got to play their own musical interlude. They each had their own guest lecture. And it was super fun. They were sending telegrams back to the home office, so that's sort of the same version of chat. So they were moving in. And then there were 2 cities who were not on the official invite list, but because the trunk cables went through their towns, they were like, well, we're gonna sit in. And so they were listening in too. And so I got to write up that story. But I also, other things that I'm looking at, some of the more gruesome stuff is sort of the history of electric shock and resuscitation. I came across a number of ideas of how to resuscitate. You have to remember that people did not understand how to use electricity and what was a risk, and then if you were shocked, could you be brought back to life? And so the history of resuscitation is fascinating to me, and I would love to write something up about that. The history of engineering education is something that is definitely close to my own heart. I did write up a little piece about that as just a glimpse. And the reason I wrote that up was that really for the entire 20th century, there was an ongoing debate about what is a proper education for an engineer. And at the very beginning, they said you had to have a classical liberal arts education. If you did not know your classics, your humanities, you could not be a good engineer. And I know, yes, that is exactly. And so I want to make that clear. And we're not talking like small folks who are saying this. We're talking leaders in the field who are saying this at great schools. And somewhere along the line, we may have lost that thread in looking at all of the requirements that you need to be technologically literate. Are we still looking at the same requirements to be conversant just as a human? So.
All right, we're at the top of the hour. Just do one more question. Anybody? Well, let me walk around.
We have a question from
We do?
Sweet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Didn't see your hand up.
And this will be a little bit of speculation on your part, so bear with me. One of the thoughts that I keep coming back to is that women were visible at the time, right? How long does it take us, how many generations does it take us to lose that history?
Oh, how quickly can we lose that history? Is that what you're asking? I think immediately. I think they're erased almost immediately from any kind of a record. And yeah, I'm going to say immediately. Like, there's not a generational loss. It's not, people just fade away so quickly unless you are actively, consciously making an effort to make sure that your story is preserved. It will not be preserved. So I'm just going to put this out there for everyone who's working in the field. You should save your stuff, give them to the archives, right? But also record your stories. The archives are filled with oral histories of all sort of the great men. Well, you know what? There are a lot of women there too. What if we had all of the women who were in my pictures, we had their stories and we learned, okay, like what didn't work out in the lab? What were all the things that we tried that didn't get written up? There is no one who is too small to be included as part of the history. And so I would say this at like every single stage of your career. If you're a student, you should get your story recorded because you have an experience. And maybe in the future, we could look back and like, oh, wait a minute, we treated these women quite poorly. We should fix that. You could look at that later. If you're an emerging professional, if you're mid-career, if you have left the field and you want to give those reasons why, tell that to someone who is in a position to record that history. So there's lots of places that do that, whether that is a local history society or local library, or any of the professional organizations. All of the engineers have their own societies, and you can make that information available to them. And they should welcome it. I can imagine all the History Center people going, no, you've just done ideas. But I think they should all welcome your stories. So.
Professor Marsh, thank you so much for a wonderful lecture.
And they'll turn off my mic, but I will still talk to you if you want to come. You can talk.
And thank you all for attending tonight's program. For information about all of our upcoming events, go to lindahall.org. Thank you and have a great rest of your evening.